Good day, everyone. It is Calxiyn and Hunter here, and we are back with the Queen's Court podcast. It has been a long time, but I did post a video about that on my main channel.
Years?
Yes, it has. Probably. We looked entirely different, I think, last time we recorded and everything, but we are here to talk about many things today, mostly Fields of Mistria versus Stardew Valley, but not in the way that you think. We are talking about how it is indicative of a larger issue, I guess you could say, in fandom culture, and the idea of, like, why do people care if games copy each other? Not that I think that Fields of Mistria is a copy, but this basically started because on Twitter I had said, well, who gives, are we after a minute? Who gives a shit? Right? Like, who cares? Right? Oh, well, we're not monetized anyway. We don't have enough subscribers to be monetized yet, so who cares? Okay, yeah, so anyway, I posted on Twitter, I was like, who even cares? Right? If it copied each other, don't you want new games that are inspired by the good games that you already like? And so we wanted to talk about that in this whole issue of people being very defensive over the thing that they enjoy.
I don't know about this.
Yes,
and
so
perhaps other people in the audience don't.
Chronically online. Yes, I will pull out the pointer that we use on the Calxiyn channel. I will explain to you. But first, I want to do like weekly catch up. So that's like what you're in for this episode. But like, how's it been, Hunter? What have you been doing? How's your life?
Oh God, that was the one thing I hope we wouldn't have to talk about.
Sorry, did I put you on the spot? You went to go see Alien. Was it good? Alien movie.
Yes, we're talking about it. Wow, what a diverse lineup of conversations.
I'm just saying, that's what you did this week. You don't tell the audience to do that.
I did see the new Alien film, and I really do enjoy the Alien films.
So it's part of the Alien franchise, then?
Yes.
I thought that it was just a movie about aliens when you explained this to me the other day.
It's much better. It's a movie about capitalism.
Yes, okay.
So the Alien series are these very like grim, dark. It's a little hot in here. It's a little grim, very grim, dark sci-fi horror films set in the future where it's almost like a post-democracy. Capitalism takes over the galaxy. You are not really aligned to nation states. You are aligned to corporations.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of these young kids, like in their 20s, that are trying to escape a mining planet that's run by Weyland-Yutani, which is the big, bad, evil corporation that goes throughout the entirety.
Don't spoil it for them because it just came out.
I won't. But so this is just the premise of the movie. That they tell you this in the trailers, as far as I'm aware. So all these kids want to escape the systems run by these corporations into free, presumably like democratic systems, but they're indentured servants, so they aren't allowed out. So they all hatch a plan to get onto this derelict, abandoned ship that has cryostasis. So you're able to freeze yourself to make long travel in space.
Go fly somewhere else.
Exactly, and they're going to like make like refugees and illegally escape this planet, this terrible, miserable. There's 0 days of sun.
Yeah.
Like Canada at its worst, mining colony. And escape to the sort of far-flung future, and then aliens come and try to eat their flesh. Yeah. And it's just it gets more into that, but it's like, oh. And then I was kind of reminded that like, all of the Alien movies are kind of have that like evil corporation future, far-flung future, life is cheap.
Like an allegory.
Sort of like, it's kind of like the cyberpunk anime, where it's like, oh yeah, this is kind of the inevitable outcome of capitalism.
I may like that, because I was talking about this on, if you watch the Calxiyn Cares Too Much channel, you may have seen my rant about the Joker movie, where I revealed that
I want to watch that so
I don't really like film, which is surprising to a lot of people. Like, if you gave me the choice between an animated musical and an animated movie, I'd pick the musical. But if you pitted animation against live action, I would pick the animation, right? Like, live action is sort of like, if we're comparing things together, I would always pick animation before live action, whether it's a musical or not. You know what I mean? Like, animation comes first. So I don't watch a lot of movies, but that sounds fun. I like the way, and I may be interested in that. Because I said in that video, the only thing I like in terms of movies are movies that are old as fuck, like black and white, you know, Roman holiday type of whatever.
Sure.
Like, Audrey Hepburn type of movies.
You watch
psychological thriller and horror movies, and then period stuff like Bridgerton. So that's basically all you get with
will also watch like detective stuff.
Yeah,
like
well,
you'll watch
I classify that in like thriller or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
So like I will not watch like James Bond. I don't know, like you know what I mean. I can't think of anything or like
That's
superhero
valid.
movies
Sure,
or anything.
yeah,
but like
yeah.
I'm like okay,
You'll watch Spider-Man.
Aliens is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're currently watching A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. That's
Yes, we are
probably
doing
what we're
that.
gonna do after this. So like, yeah, you do like some stuff.
Yeah, but it's very particular.
It was just sort of fun that like with the Alien franchise, this has always sort of been a background notion, or sometimes foregrounded notion of like the kind of anti-capitalist message of these films. And then Alien Romulus was very, very forward about it, just in its general premise.
Maybe
and
as you grow up, it also becomes more obvious.
That's true. Mind you, I did not watch those movies when I was aware of the movies when I was a little kid. I did not watch them because I was frightened of them terribly. I didn't want like a alien monster to shoot stuff down my throat.
How times change.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Now. Yeah, well, I'm not gonna. Thanks for calling me out there. God damn. Okay, if you can
the type of podcast that we're.
If you can make that joke, I'm blushing. If you can make Jack joke, I can also make this reference. So, what do you know about the aliens from Aliens?
I know like about the pregnancy and the birth and that sort of thing.
Okay, so like they were designed by this guy, this like mental Swedish artist, I think, named H.R. Giger or Geiger. I've heard it be said either way. And H.R. Geiger's idea was to create this monster that preyed on the sort of Freudian anxieties of men.
Oh.
So it's just yes, because the face huggers are these big, scary, like tentacle things that jump on someone's face and then like stick a very large tube down their throat forcibly and expel an alien seed. So and expel an alien seed that, you know, then results in you giving birth, right? So it's implied of like, oh yeah, it's like what, like it's meant to prey on the sort of anxieties around being penetrated and made pregnant. Right. And then have this
so it's kind of like
chest
how
bursting.
men treat women.
Yeah.
Is how the aliens treat men.
It's like the Freudian psychological anxieties that men won't do things that they view as
feminine.
Yes, sort of that sort of dealio. Which was explicit, and then also with the actual aliens, they have a very long head that's meant to look sort of phallic.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on.
They have big, like pointy, like tails that they stab into people, and they excrete a goo that is like toxic, and they have a little tiny mouth in their big mouth that like reaches out and like pecks at people. It's all a lot of penetrating in my anti-capitalist horror film, and the reason, and I whipped this out. And I whipped this out when I saw the film because the origin of that is that I'm told on trans Twitter. So if this is incorrect, maybe blame trans Twitter.
Yeah, guys, don't
come for
fact
me.
check anything.
We don't fact. It's a podcast. We don't fact check.
No.
If Joe Rogan doesn't have to fact check, we don't either. Anyways, I've not watched a single episode of that man's podcast. The idea for that came when H.R. Geiger, the designer for the original Aliens, dropped acid and had sex with a transgender woman.
Oh, well, isn't that a little transphobic then?
Maybe, but also I just kind of thought it because it was just like, yeah, afterwards he's just like, wow, I opened my subconscious and I felt differently about a thing, and maybe it was like
I see. So he's like, I actually felt good about something I was afraid of, and so okay, so it wasn't a demonizing
no.
thing.
At least I hope not. Honestly, even if it is a demonizing thing, if the xenomorphs from Alien are trans, I want that.
You're kind of like trans. Death of the Offer. Like,
I'm like, you know what? It's like how Babadook is gay. It's like the xenomorphs are also gay. So yeah, because the idea was just like, like that was like, that it made him feel differently about himself. And then he acknowledged those anxieties, and then he turned those anxieties that he was probably critical of, I can only assume. He's European, they're all freaky over there.
Yes.
And turned it into these monsters, which is sort of...
Please don't sue us, Monster Man.
Well, H.R. Geiger has passed about a decade ago, so you're not getting sued. If you're haunted by the voice of a Swede, I don't know, but... Yeah, I saw that, made me giggle a lot.
Yeah, that's what Hunter did.
That's a nice one. That's one I explained to a group of people that I saw this movie with, and like, it was funny because some people were like, some people were disturbed. One person said slay, which was amusing to me.
I did not have any interesting anecdote like that, so I just wanted to ask you about your day, because in terms of weekly catch-up, I don't know. All I can think of, I went to the sleep clinic, and they told me I have insomnia.
So you have insomnia?
Yeah, so I have insomnia,
okay.
and that's the only interesting thing. So I
How
guess...
many times in an hour
14 times
do you wake up when you sleep? I heard that, and I was like, oh... How do you, because we've known each other for a very long time. We went to high school together, and at this high school, we both had to get up 6 o'clock in the morning as teenagers.
That's probably why I wanted to, go to the tree or whatever you say, right? Like how I was depressed all the time. My mom even said, like, eventually, because I was so depressed, she told me, okay, I'll drive you to school to alleviate some of the thing. But like now, okay, I feel pretty vindicated because I have had this problem since I was like 13 years old, which was probably like, what do you call onset, or like it happened because of puberty, and probably an underlying thing that erupted, as I was a teenager. And so again, not to justify poor behavior or anything, but like, so the doctor explained, even though I try to go to bed in a way that will assure me 10 hours of sleep, if I wake up 14 times a night, and if it takes me an hour to fall asleep, and if I wake up to go to the bathroom at 4 in the morning and it takes me 30 minutes to go to sleep, I'm only getting 5 hours of sleep. Right? So I've only been getting 5 hours of sleep since I was 13 years old. So if you've ever criticized me for not remembering something, right? Arnold's like, Kaylin, you don't remember my favorite food? I'm like, no, I guess I don't, because I have memory problems because I have insomnia, right? Or like, again, wanting to go to the tree, having behavior that would probably be like very erratic and like, irrational and all of these other things.
I was just a little bit sleepy.
I was just a little bit sleepy. Like, think about, what's associated with insomnia in terms of like paranoia and like all of these other things, right? And then also you're a teenager going through hormones. I'm just like, well, no fucking wonder. I used to have all these problems. No wonder I was miserable all the time, especially at school, because I just couldn't sleep. And I've been having this problem since I was 13, but it only really manifested into something that I wanted to get checked after. Because here's what I thought. I thought, okay, this is because of school.
Yes.
Right? And then at musical theater school, I was like, this is because of school. Right? And so then I graduated and I realized it was not because of school, it was still happening. So I went to the doctor and I was like, I've been tired all my life, but I blamed school for it because, especially at Randolph, I had to wake up at 5 in the morning for dance class at 8. Like, that's enough to make everybody miserable. But then I graduated and realized, oh no, I'm still miserable, so I gotta go get that checked. And that's how we got to the insomnia. So the last 2 nights, I started to look up the therapy that they wanted me to undergo because I'm a good little student, and I started to do some reading myself. And like, so here's what I've done in case anyone is curious, and then we'll actually talk about what we're supposed to be discussing today. I just wanted 10 minutes of catch-up time, okay? They said to write out your worries in a diary before you go to bed. Some people may find that you focus on the worry more. Yeah, exactly. Some people may find that's not good because it's just on your mind again. For me, I actually thought it was very helpful to like write in a journal and be like, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow if I worry about so I have this thing of like, oh, one day somebody from my life is going to be like, I knew Calxiyn in high school and she was an asshole and they're going to try to expose me on Twitter because I didn't say hi to them in the hallway or something, right? And so that's like a common anxiety I have. And so like I wrote down in my journal, I was like, and if someone exposes me on Twitter, like that's never happened before, so why would it happen? Like, or whatever you're supposed to write down, like that's something that's literally never happened. And if it were to happen, who cares? And like doing that sort of thing. So like the worst possible scenario is what? Like some people believe it, but then other people see the absurdity, and someone I knew in high school who doesn't even know me, like trying to talk about me as if they know my behavior in the modern day. Also, so, like trying to rationalize the outcome,
I was also there. No one in high school is like secretly plotting. Well,
like, that's something we'll talk about this later, but I think I have OCD, which is something else that we have to talk about with the doctor sometime probably. But like, it's not OCD in like, the stereotypical cleaning things way. It's more like what if the cat jumps onto the counter and turns the knob on the stove and lights the house on fire? I must go downstairs and make sure that the stove is off, and I will not be okay until I make sure. Or like, what if I somehow sent a nude picture of myself and posted it on Twitter when I was listening to music in the shower? I must check Twitter and make sure that my nudes are not on the internet. Like, it's stupid shit. That stuff's stupid. That's stupid. There's no rational. Hunter's like, I'm finding out some things about myself. I see it in your eyes. Hunter's like, Cal, we gotta talk about this later. I might have OCD, Cal. So yeah, so I have...
No, I'm just like, no, that's just a kind of boilerplate anxiety.
Yeah,
I don't, like, I'm not...
But the OCD is to, you go and you check. Anxiety is, like, the anxiety is having the thought. The OCD is if you have some sort of ritualistic behavior to go and check. Or I have, like, preventative ritualistic behavior where I will put my phone under a towel if I'm listening to music. So there's no way a picture could have possibly been taken. Yeah. Anyway, so all that fun stuff. So I wrote in the journal about everything I worry about and dispelling all the anxiety.
And as you were writing, you were like, you know what this sounds like?
Well, no, I already knew that. I knew that before because this is hilarious too. Again, we'll wrap up in a second on this, but there was a girl at my school who had OCD, and as I was saying, oh, I'm wearing my hoodie today or a hat today because I'm afraid a bird will poop on my hair, and then what if I'm stranded in the middle of nowhere and the bird poops on my hair, and then I have to like try to clean it out of my curly hair? Like, that sounds like a nightmare. And she was like, do you have thoughts like that often? Have you ever been pooped on? And I was like, no, but I worry about it, so I need to make sure because then everyone will laugh at me if I come to school with bird poop. And she was like, you might have OCD because I have OCD and that's my life. And I was like, oh no. And I never forgot that she looked me, just the look that she gave me straight in the eyes on the subway, and how she was like, I'm so sorry that I'm the one that has to tell you this. Like, we don't really know each other like that. So if you're out there, I never forgot, and it did help me. It helped me to know. But I think it's like, it's OCD in like an autism way is, I guess, the best way I
was going to say is that
because
autism and ADHD is co-conditional with insomnia.
Yeah, and
anxiety and having kind of like spiraling thought so it could also be that, but like,
you know, OCD in terms of how it manifests in other people, it's a little different. Whereas with me, I'm like, but I could have said something inappropriate and I just don't remember because that's something that people with autism, so it's like a mix between like, it's rational, but then unrational in like some other way. Like, it's sort of a mixture of like, well, it's a perfectly valid anxiety that maybe you sent a bad resume or like had a typo on your resume because nobody's calling you back for jobs or whatever. It's perfectly logical that you could have made a mistake because you're constantly, when you have autism or ADHD, you're constantly paranoid that you've made a social blunder or something. So anyway, so all that to say, write your worries in a diary. I also brought my yoga mat from the music room and I started to stretch before bed and like get all the wiggles out. And so the past 2 nights, the sleep app says that I have not woken up as often. Now, obviously, this is not as effective as the machines, you know, what they hooked me up in the hospital, but looking at the sleep app data compared to my previous sleep app data, it is all deep sleep now, as opposed to before with still up and down, even though they can't track me as well. So I feel better. I think I've been sleeping better, and it's only been 2 days. I think, you know, obviously when they call me back for the therapy, I'll do it, right? But I think for some people, some people are not self-aware, and that's why they need therapy. I'm self-aware so I can therapize myself, I think, to some extent, which is why they say, you know, for some people with autism, CBT therapy doesn't work. Yeah, because it's like, we already know what the problem is. We just don't know what to do about it.
Which is also the thing they make you do if you have, like, broader personality disorders.
Yeah, and so like I've read, like, oh, well, this type of therapy may help you more, but I don't know what the other one was.
DBT.
Yeah, the DBT, that's what they're like, that'll help you.
Yes, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the CBT therapy booklet is helping me, but I don't really think I necessarily need the therapist as much as I just needed the book. Needed the strategy. And so, yeah, stretching before bed, that was really nice. Also, I stopped talking to Arnold on the phone, you know, spending 18 hours in a Discord call or whatever, like in bed, right? Because then there's the anxiety of, oh, did the call drop and the call making the noise.
Part of you dating you is the requirement. We dated.
Right.
And we lived 10-minute walk from each other.
I know, but like when you're not physically together, the Discord call is still nice.
I wouldn't do that if
Arnold was in the house.
Good,
right?
because it's just like, you know, that probably, like, looking at a screen that much, especially a very bright screen, or having that great, like, I don't know, that probably
just in
wasn't
the background,
good for you.
like, you're so aware that another person is around.
I'm glad you're finally kicking that habit.
Yeah, so I was like,
Jesus
Arnold,
Christ.
we can't do this. So now I stretch and talk to Arnold at the same time. So we have our nightly little conversation, and then I do the yoga, and then I get all the wiggles out, and then I go to sleep. And that seems to have been working because it says I'm falling asleep in 10 minutes. Also, the cat was never an option. Like, the cat was never allowed in my room in the first place, but they said, yeah, you can't have the cat in there, right? Which I was never gonna do, but like they really.
I'll also say, is it true that
say,
your sleep app has gotten you in your sleep talking to or about your cat?
Mm-hmm.
Like you'll say like, Archie, no.
Arnold said that. Well, Arnold reported
okay.
it, not the sleep app, because he was in the call that night. But anyway, so that's what's going on in our lives. Good job, everybody.
Way different levels of intimacy.
I was going to segue.
I think I have OCD. Well, I saw a movie.
Well, you know what? It's because I explained this in the video about the podcast, right? Like, there are things that I'm more willing to talk about on the internet. Like, we just have different expectations of privacy, and like, that's okay. And I would never force Hunter to talk about, I don't know, her relationship or whatever. But that's why we're going to do, you know, solo podcasts sometimes with just me, then podcast with Hunter, and then podcast with other people. And so if Arnold and I want to talk about our relationship, like, that's okay. We can do that. I will not subject Hunter to my insane ramblings, right? And so that's why you'll probably get
but that's okay.
You know, weekly check-in.
I'm here for him.
For weekly check-in, you'll probably get some interestingly different levels of vulnerability.
Honestly, I really am very open with people in general. I think it's just with the internet, you lose a certain amount of control of its viewership.
Exactly.
It goes out in the world.
I have in my mind, I'm like, I know what I don't care. Like, so I have insomnia, so what? Like, that's not like...
Oh, insomnia, that's fine. The OCD thing, I'd be like, yeah, I would keep, personally. But, like, also, like, I'm crazy, and that's been, like, communicated online.
I mean, I also think, you know,
well.
Nicole Raffi, who's a YouTuber that I watch, like, she has OCD, and she really kind of dispelled the stigma for me, I think, because, like, there's some mental illnesses that people seem to accept more than others, like depression and anxiety.
When people talk about being more supportive,
OCD or bipolar, that's when people are like, "Well, you're crazy."
Yeah,
right?
like
and
when people,
nice.
when people talk about like accepting people with mental health disorders, it very rarely is it for people with personality disorders. Very rarely is it like autism or ADHD. Most of the time, it's like if you're a little bit anxious or a little bit sad.
Yeah, and so
like
for
that's
me,
all that they'll like. A lot of people, for as much as we have made gains over the course of like 10, 15 years that I've been more cognizant of this.
Yeah.
It's still not great, especially for something like if you add borderline or bipolar.
And so that's why I'm like, you know, not to say I have this giant audience to influence, but yeah, I'll dispel it a little bit. I'm not, you know, crazy or whatever.
Well,
like
I could give some solid evidence to the contrary, but continue.
You know what I mean? I guess I mean it to say that you probably have some of these anxieties too. I'm talking to you, right? Like, it's just they manifest for you differently. I think, you know, all humans worry about these sorts of things.
Yes.
It's just how they manifest for some people. You may worry that, you know,
or your
parents don't love
them.
you, or that you're doing bad at work or something, and then it passes you by, or maybe you do something different. Maybe you go axe throwing, right? When you feel like you had a bad day at work and you exercise, and that makes you feel better. And so the capacity to handle things is different, but
axe throwing is so
the core
specific.
of the human experience is not different. Like, we all feel these things. It's just that people express these things differently, and again, have the capacity to handle them differently. So yeah, I don't care, right? I just, for me, I'm like, I wouldn't say something that would jeopardize a job, but if a job wouldn't hire me because they knew that I was autistic, then that's not
If anything,
good. That's
honey,
bad.
do you want me to stay on the program? Do you want a details-oriented worker?
Yeah, like, you know what I mean?
Hire an autistic person.
I feel like that's all, anyway, so... I was gonna
Speaking of autism, video games.
I was actually gonna, speaking of capitalism, because that's what Stardew Valley is about. You leave the farm and escape. Do you know anything about Stardew Valley, by the way, before you get into Chronically Online?
So, like, I've never done heroin. Because I feel like I'd enjoy it too much. And I feel the same way about, like, Stardew Valley.
Oh, okay.
I look at Stardew Valley and I'm like, oh, I could really get into that.
Yeah.
Because it would just, like, get all of my little addictive things. In the same way that I'm like, I think heroin would be fun for a little bit. Oh, my
God.
But, like, I just don't want to do it. So I just constantly say no to it because I'm like, because I know I'm going to blow, like, 300 hours into it.
Yeah. I think like, I have a lot of hours. I'm not going to lie to you.
And I've had to do, because it's not like.
Let me look while Hunter is.
Because it's like, you know, it's like. Very rarely do you. I mean, that's actually a myth about drug use. Most people who use the hard drugs will only actually use it once or twice and then never use it again. But like, it's the type of thing where everyone I know who's played Stardew Valley, minimum 100
has
hours.
a problem, basically.
Oh yeah, minimum 100 hours.
I have 168, so
Exactly.
not quite 300. But still,
my friend,
that's
my other
since
friend,
January, by the way. I haven't played in a couple months, but that was like in 4 months I accumulated more hours than I have probably in like all of my gaming of the past 3 years combined, which also has to do with being not at school anymore. But like, yeah, Stardew Valley has addictive property.
and there's been other games, like there was a Yu-Gi-Oh card game for the phone.
Oh, okay.
That I downloaded it in the middle of university, first year university, and I played it for like 2 weeks, and I deleted it because I'm like, I'm gonna fail university.
That reminds me of Ruby Amity Arena, playing Amity Arena during class. That makes me so sad because I like. Okay, so here, I don't have these problems because I multitask. No, but like, you know, for me it was mostly a fidget thing, especially because in Amity Arena, you were able to fight against other people. You just kind of drag your units, right? You're not really thinking that critically. But yeah, that made me sad. Just now, I'm like, my fidget game. What happened?
I will say I can do that. I think a lot of people who say that they're good at multitasking are full of shit.
Yeah, that's true.
I acknowledge that I'm bad at multitasking.
I'm only good at multitasking in like a particular. You can't. My opinion, okay. Before we get into the game, my opinion is that like you can multitask as long as the two things do not take the same area of your brain.
I can cook and listen to music.
Yes. Or
I can play a video game and listen to YouTube videos.
Right,
yeah.
like you can knit and watch a movie, right? You can clean your house and listen to music and pay attention and retain that information. You cannot play a game where you need to read things and listen to your lecture in class. Like, you cannot do two things that require words.
It wasn't just that. It wasn't like, because I wasn't doing this in a lecture. I was just like, I would go home
in your life,
and be like, I need to study.
Games in the lecture.
I need to study and I need to text. But also,
like, you can't play a visual novel in
I need
class
to understand the heart of the cards.
You know what I mean? Like, you can play something that's kind of mindless, like Amity Arena was kind of mindless.
That's me.
Like, for me anyway.
I was the only person in all of the years of university that ever wrote physical notes in class because I had to write physical notes. So, like, the writing was useful because I'd have notes for later on. Yeah. And it was also, like, the physical thing that would...
Yeah. I think I did that, too. It just sort of depended.
Which is how I manage in general. But, yeah, same reason why I've never really touched Stardew Valley, because it's like, I don't know if I really want to give up that much time.
At this point in our lives, like...
maybe I should give it in.
We're not both single, but I was going to say, we're both single, fun women in our...
I was about to say, I'm the only single person here.
No, I have no news about that.
Do you want... Is that... I imagine you're just like, yeah, so I'm an insomnia, and also I broke up with my boyfriend in 5 years?
No, we're not. That's okay. But yeah, like, this is the time to do it. You don't have kids or anything, so, you know, this is the time to play the game.
And I also know with Stardew Valley, it's like, people play it either like... So I have 3 friends who have a farm together. Yeah. One person uses it as a capitalism simulator. Yes, where you just grow a bigger farm and make the most money. One person goes into caves and adventures.
That's Arnold. He's that type of person.
And one person uses it as a dating simulator.
Right.
So, like, yeah, it kind of has something for everybody there. And I know I would love it.
I like it more. I guess I like the relationship with the townspeople. My thing with Stardew wasn't capitalism. I did like the cave adventures, though. That was fun. But it was more so the idea of, like, you're taking something that is barren and empty and you're restoring it to its, you know, assumed former glory because your grandfather had the farm and so you're restoring the farm and whatever. So, like, kind of decorate it. I wasn't, like, min-maxing the money because that just stresses me out. I don't want to do that. I just kind of, like, want to do my thing and make sure that it looks nice. And I think that's why I stopped playing the game, because after I had accomplished what I wanted and, like, spoilers, I don't know, like, grandpa comes and is like, you did a good job if you did a good job, and if you didn't, well, fuck you. And so, like, after that, I was kind of like, well, grandpa said I did a good job, so I don't really feel the desire to play anymore. Also, my controversial Stardew opinion is I don't like Ginger Island. This is something that they added, so you have another island and another farm, and it's kind of like post-game content, I guess you could say. But I don't like it. I like if the island wasn't somewhere you had to travel to, I would probably like it more, but I don't like the idea of having two distinct places separated from each other. Like, I wish the island was somehow connected to the mainland. I don't know, maybe that's stupid, because, like, in terms of game mechanics, like, yeah, you can get there as easily, but I don't know, it just feels so disconnected. Like, it feels like a different game, I guess. So I don't like Ginger Island post-game content, but yeah. If I got back into Stardew, it would probably be for the mod. Like, I'd probably download a mod and, like, start over or something.
Yeah.
Or, like, start a brand new farm with friends. Because Arnold and I pretty much, I think we accomplished everything that we could have. There were some challenges that we didn't do. But, like, in terms of, like, the main story and, like, most of, like, the additional stuff, I think we finished the museum. I don't know, I would have to check.
That game kind of strikes me as, like, Minecraft, where after a while you sort of have to make your own fun with it. And so your capacity to enjoy yourself is, like, your capacity to not get bored with building shit and
it's kind of like that, yeah.
Maybe a little less creative.
And I think, like, everything just has an end eventually, you know?
Oh, yeah, like, you get tired.
You know,
it's just that the end is after 100 hours.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess you could say that. But yeah, I'd probably play it again with a mod, or I'd do a different farm type, or like
they add more stuff over time.
It's the idea of, like, oh, well, you started from the ground and you built it up. Well, if you built it up, then you built it, you're done. You built it up, you're finished. But this leads us, I guess, into, so that's Stardew Valley, right? Everybody knows. This leads us into Fields of Mistria. So I have not played the game because of broke. And so as you can probably predict, this stream is not really about comparing them. Somebody did do a YouTube video about that. And that's what sparked this topic, because I saw, like, this going on. And I do want to play Fields of Mistria because it looks interesting. It looks, again, similar to Stardew and Animal Crossing and that sort of thing, but it has magic and the characters look gay, and it just seems like, you know, Stardew is definitely for the girls.
I feel like farming simulators are a little bit fruity
this was like more fruity, I guess. Like, just the type of, you know, characters that they had, I was like, ooh, okay, interesting. Like, it hit different. Kind of like, you know, the characters in Baldur's Gate that people are in love with? Like, it was kind of like if the game was full of those. Okay. Like, the women and, like, that guy that's, like, Preminger. Like, they understood
people
right?
I feel like women, or gay women, or queer people in general, understand when they're being pandered to.
Yeah. Like,
and they enjoy it nonetheless.
In Fields of Mistria that looks very much like a butch lesbian. They are a man, but there are mods to make them into a butch lesbian.
And that's why we have mods.
Right? It just changes pronouns and other stuff, because, like, functionally, they can work the same.
Does Stardew Valley have a butch lesbian?
I don't think so, out of my memory. Also, like, something different about Fields of Mistria is, like, when characters talk, they have a fully designed panel of, like, how they look. Whereas in Stardew Valley, you kind of just, you have a pixel art, but you kind of have to imagine how they look. You know, it's like the difference between seeing, like, Little Link and then Breath of the Wild Link, and so it's kind of hard. I never really was, like, down bad for a character in Stardew, because you don't really get to see them. You see, like, a pixel art version of them, and it feels, I don't know, like, it's just different, right? As opposed to Fields of Mistria, which has the art and then it has the pixel art. But, yeah, so I haven't played it, so if you're looking for that, this video's not for you. I'm more interested in the phenomenon of, like, this is a Stardew clone, right? And this happens with so many things, right? Like, this is a clone of this is a clone of that, like, this book is just this in a different font, and, like, you know, you see that with everything. You see that with book talk, you see it with games, you see it with shows. You know, there's a show called My Lady Jane right now that's on Amazon, and I think it got canceled, which is too bad, because I want to see it, but maybe I'll find it some other way. And people are like, well, this is just Bridgerton. But then I looked it up, and, like, the guy or the girl, I don't know, one of them is a shapeshifter. How the fuck is that like Bridgerton? Because they're both period pieces? You think they're both like Bridgerton? Anyway, so, like, you have that sentiment a lot of the time. And what interests me in terms of this discussion, I don't know if it's generational. I don't know if it's mine. You think it's generational.
No, because I think I just feel old, because I remember Harvest Moon.
Right.
Harvest Moon was a series of games starting in the NES, so, like, since the 90s, where you were just a little farmer and you had a little town and you had a wife.
And the guy that made Stardew was inspired by Harvest Moon. And so, like,
the reason why people liked Stardew Valley so much is because Harvest Moon games had been crap for, like, 10 years, because the actual Harvest Moon devs got, like, replaced because
Story of Seasons,
and so
like,
they went off and they started making the Story of Seasons, which did not have the, like, cultural cachet of Harvest Moon.
I didn't play Stardew. Oops.
Because all of my friends are gay.
Yeah.
And they all own Switches. and they all played Stardew Valley. I know so much about this game. I know about how you have to give someone a magical vibrating banana. I know that there's a girl with purple hair that everyone simps for.
Yeah, Abigail.
I know that there's this, you can figure out that two people are like cheating on each other or something.
Yeah, that's true too.
I know all of this stuff.
But yeah,
I know that fishing
Moon
sucks.
Story of Season thing, like that fucked with my mind for a while. I didn't understand.
So, the team that made Harvest Moon good started making Story of Seasons, which
but then the bad people retained the name of the IP,
Harvest Moon,
and it made it seem like Story of Seasons is a clone of Harvest Moon.
But yeah, these people,
Story of Seasons is the real Harvest Moon.
These people just don't know their history. They don't understand that Stardew Valley was just like a more. It was like Harvest Moon but gay.
Yeah,
and modernized, and it didn't suck anymore.
Right? Like there are games that are trapped on old consoles and have not been,
your cat.
ported, and it's probably my sister, God hopes. But yeah, so like, with Stardew and things like that, it's like, well, the motivation or the appeal is like, well, we used to like this thing, right? But this thing is not being made anymore, or it's not being made in a good way or whatever, so I will make thing, and thing will be good, right? What comes to mind immediately is, for example, Style Savvy, right? Yes. I don't know where they are. Somebody, call the cops and try to find out what happened to that dev team. I don't know, but like Style Savvy, the spiritual successor, a lot of people see Fashion Dreamer as a spiritual successor to Style Savvy. And, like, in some ways it kind of doesn't have the same vibe, right? But, like, the whole purpose of that is that, like, there was a thing, you like the thing is gone.
Here's
the thing is slowly becoming, like, inaccessible. Right? And you see that a lot with, like, dress-up games, or, like, we play a lot of old Barbie games, right? Like, or people are remaking Flash games that used to sort of exist, or something that has the vibe of a Flash game, because, like, the children, they yearn for the Flash games, right? So, I think it is generational. I was gonna say that, because I think, and, it's funny, because I was talking about this with Aster, if you guys don't know, Aster Rhymaster, and she was saying, I hope she's okay with me saying this, but I'm sure it's fine, but, like, she kind of theorizes that the generation kind of directly underneath us has more of an attachment to their identity being intertwined, not in, like, I don't know, like a club, or like that they are a gamer, but in the fandom of a specific game or a specific show. So like we like Ruby, but people's identity, for some people, is directly intertwined with being a Ruby fan. And the idea that somebody is making Ruby but better, or Ruby but different, seems as almost like a threat, or like some sort of act of disrespect to the thing that they like, is Aster's theory about it.
Which, on the topic of capitalism, the idea of like defining yourself as someone who consumes media product, primarily thinking of yourself as that, is a little bit sad.
Yeah, and so I think that what happens here, well, there's a couple things. So the first thing is, I think that for some people, it's like, well, I'm a Stardew Valley fan, so I feel the need to defend Stardew Valley from this imposter, right? And that there's stock in, like, in that, and, like, trying to defend the game. Now, some of this doesn't come from fandom, but does come from bad faith sort of copycats, right? Like, Farmville was super popular on Facebook in 2013, but then you had all these Farming Mania, or like farming this or farming that, or like Cafe World, again popular on Facebook, but then you have like, Cafe Crasher or something, like you have all these things that are knockoffs, right? So I think that because game dev has become easier and more accessible, especially to bad people that are like in, like, I don't know, another country, and they're developing games to prey on you and get your microtransactions. Like, there are a lot of copycats of very popular games, and so when you're kind of surrounded by shit, it's easy to, like, look at something like Fields of Mistria and be like, well, this is just another copy. It's almost like shovelware, like how we used to have shovelware as a kid, but at least with shovelware, there was still, like, a barrier to entry. You still needed a developer and a publisher and, like, money and whatever, but now anyone, like, some random person far, far away can just, like, code,
use, Unity assets and make a crappy horror game.
Farm McGee and whatever, and, like,
and interesting stuff has come out of that, because Stardew Valley is just one guy doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, interesting stuff can come out of independent devs, but also a lot of like a lot of
there's
like,
a lot of
schlock
crap.
can
You know,
come out too.
there was a whole video I watched recently, and it was like all the shitty stuff on the Nintendo eShop because apparently they're just letting any bitch like post on there.
Oh my god, I've had
awful.
3 different people talk to me independently of each other about how there was a $90, I don't know if I can say this word, hentai game.
Yeah, something like that.
And for like on sale for $4.99, and it was like a golf hentai game, and I'm like,
yeah.
Firstly, golf. Secondly, why is Nintendo, squeaky clean Nintendo, allowing for this?
Like,
and like also like, is that what you want on your?
I know, it's just bizarre.
You know?
So, to some extent, I sympathize for people.
It's okay, she doesn't sleep very well.
I know, for people that have this mentality, because there is a lot of shit out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like after finding out that it's an earnest attempt to try to pioneer something in the genre, like, wouldn't you want to leave it alone? So that was the first thing that I was like, I think it's fans that have a personal identity with the game, and so they don't want, like, the idea that something else is capitalizing on this. And it's also parasocial, too, because the game was made by one guy, so a lot of people may feel parasocial about
and
that.
And he does have
right?
this kind of rags to riches sort of idiosyncratic quality about him.
Underdog story. So, like, it becomes even more personal.
He was using a really crappy desk, and after he sold, like, a 10 millionth game, he bought a nicer desk.
Yeah, like, he doesn't live in luxury as far as we know. He's not buying
stuff
yachts,
like that,
like...
That it's labeled, it's the type of thing that you would do, and it would result in developing something of, like, a cult of personality, you know?
Yeah, and so I think that also makes a lot of sense to me, because if people rip off, like, Genshin Impact, I don't know, like, then it's like, well, who cares, because it's Genshin Impact and they make billions of dollars. But, like, the Stardew Valley guy has gotten his bag. He has secured his bag. There is no more bag left to secure other than Hunter, apparently,
when I finally purchase,
the game. That will be
or
the
when
last,
you repurchase Stardew
Jewel
Valley.
and Eric or Concerned Ape's Crown or whatever his name is, like, that will be the last jewel, as Hunter's final purchase as the last person on Earth that doesn't own Stardew Valley. But yeah, so I think that there's that. But I also wonder if it's like this weird thing of trying to create artificial scarcity, because it's like, well, if there's another farming game, then my friends won't play Stardew Valley with me. Like, that sort of thing. In terms of, like, for example, I think about this all the time. Like, why hasn't someone tried to make a game like Kingdom Hearts? Like, fairy tales are public domain. Why doesn't anyone, try to make a game where you are a character that is going to the different worlds of fairy tales and trying to solve some sort of, problem and fight monsters or whatever, right? And I know that some of the joy of Kingdom Hearts is the absurdity of, like, Final Fantasy, Disney, whatever. But, like, I sit there and I'm like, well, if you like Kingdom Hearts, you would probably logically like that thing. At least I would like that thing. I dream about that thing all the time, right? And so I wonder if, like, part of it is, but, like, I like Kingdom Hearts, so I want people to play my thing, not that other thing that was inspired by Kingdom Hearts. I want them to play the thing that I liked, right? And so if there was another game like Kingdom Hearts, I wonder if Kingdom Hearts fans, instead of embracing that as, like, oh my god, more of the thing I like, it's like, well, now they won't play my thing because they think Disney and Final Fantasy is stupid, and this is something that doesn't have Disney and Final Fantasy. So any changes that are made in terms of, like, inspiration, it could almost be seen as, like, disrespect. Like, are you saying that Kingdom Hearts isn't good because it has Disney in it and you took the Disney out? Well, no, they just don't have the rights, and so they're using public domain
wouldn't you want a little bit more of the thing you like?
Yeah, and so that's what really baffles me, but I do think it may be in an attempt to create some sort of scarcity, because if there is a competitor to Kingdom Hearts and it has a darker tone and it doesn't have Disney and it doesn't have Final Fantasy, it kind of would convince the people like you that may not be into all that.
But also,
right?
There's just a lot of action RPGs that are
oh, sure, but I'm saying, like, fairy tale, right?
Like I also like if you also like, you could also just play, like, a newer Tales of game. That's
true.
But
I guess, like, for me, I'm like, well, I like it for this specific reason. And so, if I was deranged, I may be like, well...
If I were deranged, of course I'm not. No, but hypothetically,
if I was deranged, I would be like, well, I can't tell Hunter about, like, let's call it Spellbound or something. Let's make up it. I can't tell Hunter about Spellbound because she'll want to play Spellbound instead of Kingdom Hearts because it doesn't have all the shit that Hunter doesn't like about Kingdom Hearts. It doesn't have all the stupid, kind of corny shit. It's actually kind of, dark and more mature or something. So I feel like that there's kind of that preemptive defense as well. It's like, oh, but what if people like Fields of Mistria more? And then that kind of splits off. And also, there's kind of an underlying thing of like, does that mean the thing I like is bad? If there's something else that is marketed by Ruby, if there's something else marketed as Ruby but better, and then more people like the thing instead of the original thing, does that mean what I like is actually shit? I don't know. I feel like it has a lot to do with how the generation, again, directly underneath us, quantifies or thinks of their own identity in terms of the things that they like. Because for me, I'm like, well, now I get 2 cakes, right? Like, you see that with fan fiction all the time, that people are like, I wish that somebody would write this fanfic I like, but again, because I've already read this one. And that's very prevalent in fan fiction communities, like the 2 cakes idea. We just want to see these 2 characters fall in love in 5,000 different ways. Like, who cares if it's the same? But for some reason, when it comes to games, we don't want that. And I don't know why.
I don't know. It's funny because I also feel like there's a lot of games that's just... Because I feel like if you really like a farming simulator, there's a bunch of different kind of cozy farming simulator games that you can do. Like, I feel like if you like Stardew Valley, you probably also like Slime Rancher. You probably also like Story of Seasons. You probably also like
Animal
Minecraft
Crossing.
or Animal Crossing. You probably like a dozen other more indie games where you play as, oh gosh, I've seen where you're like a merchant and you go into dungeons and you get stuff and then you sell them as all these sorts of games. There's more and more.
I need that one. I like doing that. That's what I like to do in Minecraft. I like to set up a stall and go collect things and then upsell it to people.
Yeah.
Trade
Capitalism simulators, man. But I also feel like, because I don't know, because I also think that Stardew Valley is probably better than any Harvest Moon game, just because it's just newer, and I feel like a lot of games that are the ripoffs tend to be can be a little bit better.
And that's what was happening in terms of Fields of Mistria, is that some people do like it better because the characters are more fleshed out.
Well, hypothetically,
they have more.
Or I guess they have played it. Yeah.
I guess, right, from the people that have played it, right. That, the characters seem more fleshed out. There's a bit more, dynamics. You can watch the characters play D&D in a bar and, talk to each other, whereas in Stardew, that's kind of relegated to cutscenes, and if you go talk to someone on a normal night, they'll all talk separately. They don't really have conversations with each other. There are other things, fishing in Fields of Mistria, I believe, is more like Animal Crossing, and people hate the fishing in Stardew Valley, right? Yeah. So I think that some people must see it as a threat that Fields of Mistria have taken the criticism that Stardew Valley has gotten and has fixed over the years, and that they incorporated it from the get-go.
That's also what made Stardew Valley so good, because it came to criticism that people had about
I don't understand.
That's how shit gets. You ever try to play a game from 2000?
Yeah,
recently?
I know.
It's probably a little bit rough because you haven't played a lot of games on the GameCube, and you forgot of the number, or the Nintendo 64, and you
quality
forgot
of
life improvements that have occurred over the past 2 decades that you just kind of take advantage, or you take for granted now. I've been replaying the new Spider-Man game.
Yeah.
Or I guess the old new Spider-Man game, the one from 2018, and I'm in my head, Spider-Man 2 was a great game.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sure if I played it now, it would suck so bad.
In my childhood mind, Spider-Man 2
it was the greatest game in the world.
looked like Spider-Man 2018. Yeah. Not true. Right? I have distinct memories of playing Let's Ride, which is not Barbie, it's just a horse game, right? And in my mind, the forests were so detailed, and it was this whole, right, it was the Witcher quality or whatever. And then you go back to the game, and the trees are fucking popsicles, and I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? But you're a kid, and so I think that part of it is you impress your own imagination.
Yeah.
But then my memories are totally whack. I remember games, not bad games, but bad graphically games having quality 4K graphics. That's just not true. That's just not true.
I was playing on the GameCube being shit's never gonna look better than Super Mario Brothers Sunshine.
Yeah.
And nowadays I my friend has a PS5. Yeah, a handful of people I know have PS5s. And I look at some of the games they're playing and I'm like, oh my god, this is gorgeous. This is how could it ever get better? But it probably will, unless the whole video game, unless
video
game cost
die.
game costs get too high and the economics of it collapse and people just don't make big fancy games anymore, unless that happens, probably will get better looking as time goes on. It's just inevitable.
Here's the other thing I was thinking about, though, because we talked about things looking better. I'm not saying, because this is not right, that pixel art or 2D games are easier to make, right? But I am saying that in some regards, they are easier to make than 3D games, and they are more accessible, I think, to the common person, especially because you have stuff like RPG Maker or like Visual Novel Maker as like baby's first game dev, right? Like and we'll talk about this because I wanted to talk about this too, like if I wanted to make a video game, it would probably have to be 2D because I've never coded anything before. And so, you know, a 2D space is easier, and I know some people are gonna come for me, but it's easier to work with. And so I think my controversial opinion is that the reason why people see so many similarities with Stardew and Fields of Mistria is because they're both pixel art. However, what seems to be neglected in this conversation is that 3D is expensive, and it's expensive to do well. You'll see even major game studios like Pokemon struggle with making things look good. And so pixel art is kind of a, not fail-safe, but like it's a timeless way of making things look nice without having to like stress out your brain about, you know, how the Pokemon look in a 3D environment, right?
It's how I feel about like cel-shaded games. Yeah. I think like we were talking about games that don't age well. Like, realistic looking games from like GameCube era look bad. Like they're just grimy, and they're still enjoyable. Like I still had a good time. But like you look at something like Wind Waker, you look like something like Jet Grind Radio, or a couple other like good prominent examples of sort of cel shaded looks. They hold up a lot better. They like that kind of
Kingdom
stylized.
Hearts, I feel like has a timeless look. Like even though again it's been remastered, so maybe it does look better in some regards now. But like Kingdom Hearts looks a lot better than like Barbie Horse Adventure. Maybe Barbie would have done looked better if they
it was more
tried to do
cel-shaded and
or
more
even
stylized,
like how the Barbie movie is, where it's like, oh well, this is a dollhouse and it looks like a dollhouse and whatever. Remember that horrible looking Disney game that we played that had the faces of the real kids for the dress up game, and how you could impose your own face on it? Like, would that not be better if they just let you be a cartoon? Like if they had just they didn't need to do realistic graphics in the Disney dress-up game.
Speaking of Spider-Man, there was shortly after Spider-Man 2 a Spider-Man Ultimate Spectacular Spider-Man game. It was cel shaded, and it looks really, really nice. You can tell it's older because they're repeating textures and stuff. But like, look at that game versus like Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man 3. Like, it looks better just because it understands it understands that stylization like goes a distance. And I feel like a lot of pixel art games, especially really nice pixel art, like another game from that's released at this time, like the new like Spider-Man 2, over time, in 10, 20 years, people are going to look back at that if we do have this linear line of like
I do feel like we're getting to the top.
We might be getting there.
As we start to see people's pores, I'm like, you can't make this any more human looking. Like, we're getting to the top, but you're right.
But like, it's only going to get better. So something like that is going to look worse, where I feel like something like Stardew Valley or the other game you mentioned, Mysteria,
Fields of Mistria.
Fields of Mistria. Are only gonna hold their own.
Or even, you know, Hades, something like that, something that's in a more anime-ish, like, storybook almost art style, right? And so that's the other thing that I wanted to add, is that, like, I feel like nobody's really taking that into consideration, is that the reason why we see a lot of pixel art games, like, it's not to clone Stardew Valley or any specific pixel art.
There's economic factors behind it.
Economic factors, and then also just...
And artistic factors.
Pokemon looks ugly, okay? That's the reason why I haven't been able to get into a Pokemon game that has been off... what was the last one that was probably 2D?
I tried... Okay, so the last one that was properly 2D was Black and White 2.
Right, that's the last one I played.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
And if you look at Black and White 2 and the animations therein, I mean, there was some janky animations there, but you look at the sprites there versus like the new Pokemon games, it's just like there's especially with like the translation of the older Pokemon that existed in 2D into a 3D space, they just kind of look awkward. I'm also disappointed that like So the new 2D Zelda game that's coming out, and the previous one, the Link's Awakening remake, had this really nice like baby doll miniature kind of aesthetic. And I'm like, that looked so great. I think that game is really going to hold up in the visuals department because it is just so aesthetically pleasing.
I agree.
In contrast, you have a game that came out shortly after, the remake of Diamond and Pearl. I think the remake kind of looks worse than the original because the original has a really appealing, kind of standard definition pixel art style, but still a very nice pixel art style. And they tried to do this kind of 3D chibi art style, but they just didn't, because you have to almost do something else with it, or else it looks plain. It wasn't cell shaded. If it was cell shaded, I think it would look nicer. If it had that kind of like miniature je ne sais quoi,
like little doll.
Yeah, the kind of like doll quality that the Zelda remake had, I think it would look great. But as it stood, it just wasn't. I still played the game and I enjoyed it because that was one of my favorite Pokemon games back when I was a kid, Diamond and Pearl. I enjoyed myself a lot, but.
And that's why I haven't think that's why I haven't think. That's why I thought that I haven't been able to get into a Pokemon game since then because I just don't like how they look. And the 2D environment allows, I guess, you to imagine more what the Pokemon look like. Then when you actually see them in 3D, it's almost disappointing. It's almost like your imagination was better. The pixel art allowed you to imagine it better. But then when you see them in 3D space, it's like, oh, this is kind of uncanny is the word.
Yeah, I will say that, like, Pokemon, I think, is a famous example of a game series that, like, many people have tried. There was Digimon, there was that, like, Fossil whatever game for the DS. Do you remember that one? There was a bunch of different games, different RPGs, had spin-offs. There was a Dragon Quest and a Final Fantasy spin-off where you were, like, collecting monsters. There was that weird game that came out at Steam that was very obviously a Pokemon ripoff.
I know what you're talking about.
I forget what that was called. I
don't
knew
even
some people
remember
who played
either.
it. And like, they've all come for the crown and they've all made some success. People, when that Steam game came out, people were like, oh, this is going to beat Pokemon. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, people are going to like it for a month, and they did, and then they left it en masse. Pokemon can kind of rest on their laurels because no one can really come for the king.
What I think that's about, and we could do a whole other podcast on this if you want, but I want to transition into the other half, or I guess probably more of a third at this point. So what I think that is that I don't think, maybe it was, and I'm just naive, I don't think Pokemon was originally created with the intention to sell toys in the same way that things are nowadays.
And cards and the anime and, so, like, and all the spin-offs.
Obviously, they probably predicted a tie-in would happen, but the reason why Pokemon is so special is because they made creatures that felt like your friends. I know that sounds kind of weird, right? But, like, nowadays, people make Pokemon-esque things to be collected, and the point that they are missing is that you don't care about collecting for the sake of collecting. You care because you have an emotional attachment with the Pokemon, right? And so, you know, this is random, but like Mr. Beast is doing sort of like little monsters, right? Like collectibles, I guess, kind of like, you know, Webkinz, Beanie Babies, whatever.
Mr. Beast Pokemon?
Yeah, kind of. Like they're little monsters and then you get random ones and it's like, oh, collect them all or whatever. Like, but like, for me, I'm like, oh,
and
okay.
this little monster will text a minor.
Oh my
and
God.
This little monster
allegedly don't
will give money.
Oh man, I'll keep that in.
And this little monster will rig a game.
So, yeah, I knew he was a bad example, but he's all I could think of. So other than like actual children that just think monsters are cool, from my perspective, the only reason why I liked things like that, say UB Funkies. I don't know if anybody's gonna remember UB Funkies right now.
Yeah.
But UB Funkies was a game where you also had little monsters, but you could put your little monster on a big monster and then go into a digital world. Like that was the point. Yes. So you had some sort of attachment and some sort of purpose.
There was Chaotix, there was Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh's still around.
Yeah.
Magic's pretty big. I feel like if Magic wanted to do something like that.
But that's like card games, not necessarily for kids, kids, right? For kids at
and you're
least,
not collecting
you have to
monsters.
facilitate the emotional journey, and that's what a lot of games that try to copy Pokemon don't understand, because even though, some people may say that Pokemon lost its emotional journey along the way, but it doesn't matter, because at least they have the nostalgia aspect of going on the journey, right? That's why they're able to rest on their
I don't know.
laurels,
I think
right?
a lot of, I think Pokemon media is still good. Like, people who I know who watch the anime still like the anime, and I know that Pokemon Resort
I really
stop motion
that.
animation. I watched that all in one afternoon.
I'm saying,
it was great.
in terms of the game, people like the games are bad now, they were better before, right? Like, I'm not saying that that's true or not true, I guess. Like, think about what you want. What I am saying is that at least Pokemon gets to rely on, as a kid, I used to go into this big world and collect the Pokemon and found all these new things, and so, they get to have that, right? And, that's where the emotional part comes in. But if you're making something just collect the monsters, well, who gives a fuck? Why do we want to collect the monsters? What is the point of collecting the monsters? So I feel like that the only way for anything to rival Pokemon is by having a game that also has some sort of narrative significant. Like, for example, I know that this is kind of random or whatever, but kind of thinking of my fairy tale mythology thing before. Like, imagine if there was a game where you were a hero in Greek mythology and your job was to wrangle the monsters somehow, and you could do different methods to do this. Like, say Cerberus, for example.
Yes.
You can bribe Cerberus, you can just beat Cerberus down until you can catch him, and those sort of different choices will change your relationship. Kind of like Undertale, how Undertale has pacifists, right? Like, if you do something like that, it's like, oh, well, there's an adventure here. You're a Greek hero who needs to do this to ascend to Olympus or whatever. And the monsters that you meet along the way, they can either be, kind of forced into your submission, or they can be your friend, right? And that's kind of how things progress. And maybe there's evil people trying to take the monsters and use them for evil, like the Titans or something. So if you had something like that, I feel like that would hit a couple things for people, because it's the underdog story, it's the journey throughout the world, and then it's also unique monsters that no one has seen before, because Pal World is the name of the game you were thinking of. Like, those are just Pokemon ripoffs. For something to be successful, it needs to look like, again, mythology or fantasy or something. I mean, Pokemon is fantasy, but you guys understand what I'm saying? I'm imagining, yes, you have a little Cerberus dog in your inventory,
Watch. Do you remember that
or
one
something like that. You know what I mean? Or you have Medusa type character at your disposal.
Yeah, what you're kind of acknowledging, there was a thing. It was a show that was popular for a while in the 2010s. There was 2 games. It was Yokai Watch, and it was like Pokemon, but it was based off of Japanese spirit myths, and it was kind of its own little world. Stuff like that. I'm surprised that Yokai Watch was fairly successful. I'm surprised it wasn't more successful.
Yeah. I mean, even Bakugan. I always felt Bakugan was different enough.
I like Chaotic. Do you remember Chaotic?
Oh, I love Chaotic. I still have Chaotic. I have the cards. Next live stream, we'll go through.
Oh my gosh, can we go through the Bakugan? And I loved the show,
stream.
And it was such a that's so 2000s. I don't know if people.
The monsters. I think that was kind
that
of
was
Canadian,
more Yu-Gi-Oh.
So.
Was that Canadian?
No. Chaotic, you got to go into the digital world and you were the monster.
That was it. So it was the idea is that you would suck yourself into your computer, and then you would go and you would catch these Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and you could play with the cards in real life, or you could use a code that was on the cards and play online with people, which was new because I think that was before Pokemon did that and Magic did that. And
I said Souls Art Online. I'm sorry. I mean Sword Art Online. I don't know why.
It's the show was kind of like Sword Art Online, where people was you have this card, so you can turn into this monster, and it was people and it had its own kind of Magic the Gathering-esque internal lore with the different factions and the different races and the different characters. Yeah. That show kicked ass.
I know.
It's a shame that wasn't more popular. That should have had legs.
Do Bakugan looking.
I feel like we should just do relatively.
Podcast.
I feel like we should do episodes of relatively obscure 2000s cartoons.
I know. I think that would be really good. I know, but what if you react to it and edit? No, we're tired. So I think that maybe that would be the next way to do it.
We're waking up 14 times in an hour at night.
Oh, my God. So I guess this is where I would have liked to segue sooner, but Hunter and I yap, and I'll have to keep that in mind next time that I plan things, because this was supposed to be a midpoint, but it's probably more like a quarter. So this podcast was brought to you by Patreon. Please go support the Patreon so we can still be here. Word of mouth would be nice, too, if you have a friend that you're I think that my friend would love this podcast. We're trying, but to get monetized, we need to get 1,000 subscribers, and so hopefully we'll get them, and they'll be here, and then that way we can make money. And so yeah, so that's just my little ad break, because, like, okay, so I made a whole video on the main channel about, like, oh, why are Calxiyn and Hunter doing this, blah, blah, blah. So, like, it's not like if we don't make any money, we're gonna go away, because this is basically kind of just to facilitate a baseline content where if Ruby never comes back, you guys can still enjoy us in some capacity. And the main channel can't necessarily facilitate that because we have a bunch of people that subscribe for a bunch of different bullshit, right? So this is kind of like, you know, and I talked about this, YouTubers tend to have kind of an easy thing that they can just do, right? Either it's live streams
why YouTubers
or it's podcasts
because
it's commentary, like, that they can just do it, right? And so I'm not like, oh, yes, and my get-rich-quick scheme. It's more like, you know, to kind of combat the burnout and stuff like that. I think it's nice for Hunter and I to get together every week. So we'll be here regardless, but it would be nice to make some money. So that's my Patreon ad break. Now, so for the second half of this video, which is going to be more like the next, like, 30, 25 minutes to keep this kind of short, because I would like to keep it under 2 hour. So I have secret game dev dreams, and this is what I wanted the second half of this podcast to be, is my secret game dev. Do you have secret dreams of a video game? I know I'm putting you on the spot,
is the conversation like one we would want to make, or just a hypothetical game that we wish
hypothetical in general, but I also, like, I want to do it. If somebody else does it, I'll sue you and take your money, but I'll work with you if you want to. So if you can develop video games and you're interested, call me. But then also, like, anyone could do this and I would be happy. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you there. I don't know. I feel like the trick with any time you ask someone what would their dream thing be, I feel like people when you ask people what they want, they might not know what they really want. They only really know what they know they already like.
I guess I will go through my hypothetical example. So, like, what sparked this was on Twitter. I was using, like, just an example, an analogy, whatever, right? And I was like, I would love it if there was Hades, right, which is Greek mythology roguelike, but instead it was fairy tales and you were going into the woods and then using the weapons of famous fairy tale people. So, like, for example, if you're going into the woods, you have an axe and it's the woodcutter's axe and you're fighting these twisted fairy tale characters, right? And so I posted that just as, like, here's an example, but I was like, yeah, I would want to make that and I would want to fuck with that, but I also realized, like, even though Hades is not, well, I guess it is kind of 3D in the combat. Like, even though Hades uses portraits as opposed to 3D cutscenes like Kingdom Hearts, it is way above my skill set. And so I'm so secretive about my ideas because I don't want anyone to steal them. But that's the one where I'm okay with that getting away. Because here's the thing. Like, if I were to adjust my vision, it would have to be a turn-based RPG. It would have to be, like, stagnant in some way. Like, yes, you could still have the different weapons in the roguelike element, but it would have to be turn-based because there's just no fucking way. Like, it would have to be kind of like Pokemon combat. And I could negotiate on my vision a little bit if I were actually going to do this. I don't know if turn-based roguelikes exist. I don't know if that's something that people even do, right? And, like, different attacks, because it's so important on the timing and stuff. So
on the topic of conversation, there is, like, a Pokemon roguelite game that's very popular. And it's just like, yeah, you get new Pokemon and then you can go through. I've never played it, but I hear it's, like, beloved. And that there's, like, 1 or 2 versions of it. How would
you rectify? Because the whole point of a roguelike is that it's hard, and so the enemies have hard patterns and stuff. But, like, with turn-based, I would just need to play, I guess, more complex turn-based games to understand how the fuck that works. Or check out those
Pokemon roguelike games, because that's a turn-based RPG
like,
that's able to do
Hades
that.
is fun because you're constantly failing and you have to adjust your attacks. But, like, if you're working with, like, 4 attacks, which is attack, defend, magic, whatever, like, I don't know, maybe looking at Kingdom Hearts would help, because Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories used to be on the Game Boy Advance, and I'm assuming it was turn-based before they ported it to the PlayStation, so maybe I just need to look at things. Not sure about that, but I fuck with that. I want the fairy tale character that goes into the woods, and they come out different, and they're fighting all my little fairy tales. You guys will notice that all of my hypothetical,
fairy tales.
They involve fairy tales.
It's almost like you have a fixation or something
in some way. So that was, like, my first one that was just on Twitter idea. My second one, which I think actually, I don't know, has legs in my delusional mind. This is my pitch to Hunter, and Hunter can be like, no, that's stupid.
I mean, the roguelite RPG thing, I think, works because people like that Pokemon RPG or a roguelike so much. So I feel like a hypothetical version of that. You look at something like a tactics game, like Tactics Advance Final Fantasy, or what's the Nintendo one? Ember something? Fire Emblem. Yes, thank you. Like that's also like if when your character dies, they're gone forever. So like I think a version of that could work hypothetically.
Because I'm like, I love Hades. I just want more of Hades, and I only have one. Well, I guess Hades 2 came out, but I
like I don't know. I'm sure there's other roguelikes that are good.
But I like this
Rogue Legacy.
I think the problem is this may be a hot take, and maybe I haven't played enough roguelikes, so you guys can assassinate me. But I think that my problem is that a lot of roguelikes don't necessarily have the story at the level that Hades does, where they have like millions of pieces of dialogue, right? And so I think that that's just my thing, is that I play games for the story, and so there may be games that are similar to Hades in combat, but in story, I don't know. Maybe, but I don't know. So my second idea, and I've had this for a while, I actually thought of this at Arnold's house, and I was starting to look up coding tutorials and whatever, like game dev tutorials. So Yandere Simulator exists. Didn't come out, right?
It didn't never. So I know that's a whole controversy. I've never actually.
We'll have to talk about that another time. So
I wanted to do.
Still working on it, but like also no.
I wanted to do the Cal explains the chronically online stuff.
That's kind of what
Hunter.
this was. Like this is a controversy, the Fields of Mistria situation. But like, so Yandere Simulator, right? So for some reason at Arnold's house, and I can't remember why, I was like, okay, but what if you have a game and the game is called Fairest, right? Like Fairest of them all. You are a person, you are not a kid, but a student. Being. You are a student, and you go to some sort of magic school, kind of like School of Good and Evil or Descendants or whatever, and like there's princesses here, there's witches, there's magic, all of that sort of stuff. And you have to kill the princesses, right? And that is your job, is to become the fairest of them all, so you must get rid of all your competition. So 3D, that seems really hard. And so what I was thinking, my adjusted vision, because Yandere Simulator's 3D, my adjusted thing was kind of more of a, I don't want to call it point and click, but kind of Nancy Drew, where like you're moving around the environment, but it would be pixel art, and like your choices would matter, as opposed to Yandere, and you can just go and kill people.
Sure.
Right? Like, I know there are action games that are 2D, but I guess, like, the whole thing with, Yandere Simulator was, like, you can go up and kill someone at any sort of time as long as there aren't other characters around. I just have trouble envisioning how that works in a 2D space. I guess you would just press the button and kill them.
You'd have to look up. I know that like Hotline Miami exists and like these 2D like pixelated action and stealth games. Yeah. You'd have to look into how they work.
Yeah, I probably would have to do a little bit of that. But my adjusted thing was kind of more something like Long Live the Queen, where it's visual novel-esque and you're making the choices. You're not exactly, like, you will not do the violence in terms of, like, go up to someone and kill them. You will make a series of choices, and if you develop your skill enough, you will almost have opportunities to do
like
violence.
Hitman?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Yandere Simulator was supposed to be. But, like, 2D Hitman. So you will develop your skills at school, and you will acquire things, and then you will have opportunities to do the violence. And then, obviously, all of these princesses will have some sort of relationship. You know, the one that I thought of, the most immediate one that I thought would be really cool is Snow White, right? Snow White's surrounded by the 7 dwarfs, so what do? You can bake something for Snow White. If your cooking skill's high enough, she'll eat it and she'll die, right? And that's how you get past the dwarfs issue. Otherwise, you have to find some other way to get rid of all of them.
You have to murder Sleepy and Snoozy and
she's surrounded, right? So the whole point of, like, how Yandere Dev's scaling...
Well, you gotta take out Doc first, or else Doc will just make her feel better.
Right. How it was supposed to work in Yandere Dev was there's one rival that's really easy, and then as you progress, the rivals are, like, constantly surrounded by people, so you have to be more strategical in what do you do. So I feel like Snow White would probably be the hardest and not a good early game example, because if she's surrounded by the dwarfs, that's problematic. But, like, I don't know, like another character, it may be, if they're a sort of loner type character, it may be easier. And so that's the dream game I want to make. I was actually telling Arnold, I was like, we're going to talk about this on the podcast, but what if I actually do it? I don't know, because I feel like that, again, not easy. Game dev is not easy. But I have the idea for how it would work. So if I just learn how to do it and then maybe use something kind of like RPG Maker or some other thing to facilitate it. You know what I mean? Because I think Pocket Mirror, which is the precursor to Little Goody Two Shoes, was made in RPG Maker. And so the nice thing about software like that is that it kind of does all the coding for you, and then you figure out how to implement the coding in the way that you want, right? Because that's, I think, the barrier to entry is that people want to write code in sort of a layman's terms of like, if this, do that, like, you know, but visual novel makers and RPG makers are able to facilitate that because they understand the common mechanics that somebody will want for their game. And so I'm like, very interesting, you know what I mean? And I think I could do the art myself because I'm starting to draw, but if you want to help me, I will not sue you, we can work together. If you steal my idea, I'll be a little mad. But like, that's kind of the sort of thing that I'm thinking about because, you know, and maybe there's not that much of a market for something like that because it's like immediately there's sort of the idea that that's too girly, right? Like, you know, and that kind of excludes a male audience. But at the same time, I think part of my motivation for these hypothetical dream games is the idea that girl games have disappeared, like the Barbie, you know, Rapunzel decoration.
I feel like there's
world,
kind of
right?
I feel like there's a lot of women that are like, ooh, cozy games now. So like girl games became cozy games.
Yeah, and like that's my problem because I mean, not a problem. If you like cozy games, that's fine. I do too, right? But for me, Hades is a cozy game. I like to sit down after a hard day and play Hades, even though it's very
punishing,
right? So I kind of fuck with the idea of the fairy tale game where you're trying to kill all of the princesses or befriend them, right? Because Yandere Simulator has a choice, right? Like a choice in how to handle the situation. Like, do you actually want to be the villain or will you, you know, learn and your character grows to be good? Like, it's basically the other thing I was kind of thinking of adjacent to that was Catherine. Catherine, you get different endings based on the choices that you make about your psyche, right? And so I kind of like that idea too, because I like narrative-driven stuff. So I think Catherine does it in a very direct way, where it's like it asks you questions, and like literally the questions do the outcome instead of the gameplay mostly, you know, having an effect on your which way or whatever. But yeah, I yearn for my fairest fairy tale game. So what do you think, Hunter? If you had money and I wasn't your friend, okay, think about this is Dragon's Den. If I came to you and I was like,
if you were like,
give me money.
If you had some kind of like workaround of that and it looked interesting, yeah, probably.
What do you mean workaround?
Like, not workaround, but like a demo or something, like a proof of concept, something like that. Yeah, probably. Because I feel like something like that is the type of like weird, witchy, cozy game that there is a real built-in audience for. I could definitely see that being like a popular thing.
I'm seeing if I have any other.
But there's also the point of like, yeah, there's the difference between a idea of a thing and the practical creation of it.
That's true. And then also like you don't know what you want until
that's the thing.
Until it happens.
Because like one of the sort of questions is like, well, what's a hypothetical game you'd really like? And I'm like, well, part of me would just want the things I already know I like.
Yeah.
You know, I guess part of me feels like we've been talking about Pokemon and we've been talking about Stardew Valley. I feel like you could like do a Pokemon Stardew Valley because like in the Pokemon world, there are Pokemon breeders. Yeah. Like Brock is one.
So like Slime Rancher almost.
Yeah, for Pokemon or like, something like that. And you live a little village somewhere in the world of Pokemon and stuff happens and you can have all these Pokemon. If it had a cute art style and was a little bit gay, Nintendo, please. I think they could pull something off like that really well. I think it'd be really great.
Like something within the IP, but then something that also capitalizes on a different genre, like a genre change.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, I Kingdom Hearts is not the best example, I guess, for this, but like if you had a Kingdom Hearts game where you had to wrangle the Heartless, that's kind of fucking funny, right? Like Slime Rancher.
So yeah, I think Pokemon versus like a Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley type would be interesting.
Oh, but I found my notes.
Oh man,
and I found like
notes.
Social, intellectual, physical, mystical. So I guess these were skills that you could upgrade. That was inspired by Little Goody Two Shoes. You had a day split like Persona, where you had morning, lunch, after school, dinner. You could either explore the school or enhance a skill. How you get rid of your rival depends on your stats. For example, if you want to go to the huntsman route, you need intrigue and conversation. If you want to poison Snow White with the apple pie, you'll need high arts, which is baking, and magic to make a potion. Snow White would be the hardest rival. She has so many sidekicks. The tutorial rival should be a princess with a simpler story. Sleeping Beauty, she's always with the 3 good fairies, except for when she sneaks off to meet a boy. So then you would have to do Sewing Club and have her prick her finger on the spinning wheel, like if you want to do it that way, or you could get rid of the fairies, or you could blackmail Aurora when you see her with the boy and get her to do another task for you. So it was kind of like a bunch of different things where you could be their friend or you could be their enemy, you could just kill them or you could get rid of them some other way, and then they would eventually fall from grace somehow. So that's my Persona Long Live the Queen Little Goody Two Shoes Yandere Simulator hybrid video game that I wanted to talk about.
And I'm asking you, Shark Tank.
Yeah, exactly.
For my funding. Yeah, I don't know. I think that would hypothetically be a lot of fun. And then also
the thing I mentioned before, which was the Kingdom Hearts but public domain fairy tales.
Yeah, that would be fun.
But yeah, luckily, I mean, we have Lies of P, which is based on Pinocchio and is a Souls game. So you do see interest in fairy tales, but it's just always baffled me a little bit how video games don't capitalize on things that are so, like, obviously public domain like that, because you would think, but at the same time, I do not see. I don't know.
Speaking of the public domain, I saw a thing I saw recently, and I'm like, how has no one thought to do this? This is brilliant. It was a black and white shooter.
Oh,
that's where you're like a Mickey Mouse-esque detective, and you're in a black and white, old school, like rubber hose.
Kind of like Bendy and the Ink Machine.
Yeah, Bendy and the Ink Machine-esque, but like not horror, shooter game where you're running around and you're shooting up a bunch of like
We'll have to find that later, because I did see that. And I saw that,
and I'm like, what a brilliant aesthetic. Why didn't anyone think to do that?
Bendy tried, but then things happened to Bendy and the Ink Machine, I guess.
And I guess also Cuphead exists.
Yeah, that's true.
And I saw there was a VTuber who does.
Yes. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know who that, but I saw that. I'm like, oh, that's genius. Instead of doing anime, do like old-timey.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much you can do, especially with YouTubers, right?
Like, yeah, and so, like, I didn't know I wanted that from a shooter, but I saw that, I'm like, oh, yeah, big, goofy cartoon violence, I'm up, that would be great.
Yeah, and so I hope one day we will get the games of my dreams, but this is why I don't really, again, have that kind of criticism or, like, side-eye to Fields of Mistria, because in my heart, I do want game I like, but better. And it's not because I want to plagiarize it. It's because I want the thing that, like, suits my particular taste to manifest, right?
And it's very rare, because, like, you mentioned Undertale earlier. I don't think anybody knew they wanted Undertale until someone showed them Undertale.
Yeah, that's true.
So very rarely do you get something like that. That's such a radical departure from the norm.
So maybe one day I will make games. That's what I wanted to.
But, like, yeah, so, like, it's a tricky question, because there's probably an Undertale-esque, like, have you thought of this?
Yeah.
That just none of us have considered until, like, a visionary has that, and we're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Why? It would be weird to live in a world where there wasn't Undertale at this point.
Yeah, and so I hope that people do not see this and then it disappoints their dreams or whatever. Because I do think that the majority of Stardew players are just, like, more of the thing I like. I think it's a very vocal sort of minority of people.
That's just people bitching on the internet, right? In general,
but I think it's like, people are very quick to cry plagiarism. And I think it comes out of an earnest attempt to try to protect the IP of, like, independent creators and people like Concerned Ape, who's, like, just one guy. But I think it also is not unfounded, like, it's also misguided, because when you think about, and the reason why I bring up fairy tales so much is because to have a fairy tale fundamentally is to retell it. That's why as much as I hate, like, Disney remakes and stuff, I wouldn't hate them nearly as much if they decided to do a different route with it, right? Like, if they decided to use their IP and tell a slightly different story. That's why I like Cinderella. I think that that's the only good one, because it's not a frame for frame sort of copy. It's like, okay, well, we took this thing and how can we flesh it out like this, and what if we do that, and, like, that sort of stuff, right? And so as much as I don't like the remakes that they're doing, I don't like them because they're frame for frame copies and whatever. But I think that the nature of fairy tales are to be retold. And so That's why I keep bringing it up. And so, I don't know, this is stupid, but like IP protection is something that has appeared very recently in human history. Humans used to share stories with each other and build stories off of those stories. And I never would want someone to steal someone else's work in terms of their code or their art or like actually trace over their stuff. But it definitely like, feels like it's diminishing or trying to dim the human spirit in a way, like when you're like, well, you can't do this because some other person already did it.
It just kind of rolls back to that earlier statement of like, you don't know your history because you're not aware that Harvest Moon was a thing.
Yeah.
And that like progress, we like to imagine that it's individuals who make these leaps in progress, but overwhelmingly it's just a bunch of different people working off of the blueprints that are created by other people and then adapted and evolved and then adapted and evolved by a next generation.
Oh, Hunter, that gave me chills.
That's just life. That's everything. That's video games, that's film, that's art, that's politics, that's science, that's everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think people are just, Star Wars flattened everything and are just silly and I don't know.
But I do think it's like deeper than Star Wars in terms of like to some extent.
The underlining
the
ideological individualist notion that like one person invented the genre is deeply, deeply silly. And to be honest with you, I bet you the guy.
I'm sure he's so flattered.
Yeah, like
he didn't even want to play it because he's like, I've play tested my own game so much I want to cry, right? You know what I mean? Like after a while, making your own game and playing it isn't fun anymore.
Especially
because you're
a game that you're just going
shit,
back and just reworking again and again and again.
Yeah, so like I'm sure that he's relieved. I don't know what kind of games he plays, but I imagine if I were him, I'd be like, fuck yeah, I can play something that's not my own game and probably like it. Right?
And it's like imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, you know?
But yeah, is there anything else you want to add?
I'm still not going to play Stardew Valley.
Oh,
sorry,
no.
it's not going to, maybe, I'm considering it a little more than...
did you have a hypothetical game of your dreams?
I think it was the Stardew Valley crossed with Pokemon, where you would you'd live in a small little idyllic...
I just wanted to check.
...part of the Pokemon world, and you can go, and you wouldn't catch Pokemon, but maybe you could have a little Pokemon...
Little farm.
And you could have different people, there was a person... that was maybe they were a former Pokemon champion and some person who's just one of those fishermen, and it's it would be the life
the NPCs.
Yeah, it'd be the life of the NPCs in the Pokemon world, and I think you could do so much interesting stuff with all of the different, with all the sort of different Pokemon side characters and all the different legendary Pokemon and all the different events that you could have happen. You could update it a lot. I feel like Pokemon haven't done as much interesting spin-offs. I feel like the DS era, you had Pokemon Rangers, which was unique. In the GameCube, you had the 2D console Pokemon games, which were very story-driven and unique. Dungeon is also, they made a new Dungeon, which is apparently pretty good, but Dungeon when you're playing a physical Pokemon. Something like that, I think, would be very interesting. I just hope Nintendo would also have the courage to make it gay.
This is a weird sort of thing to end off on, but Aster Rhymemaster made an entire video about Pokemon's evil women or unhinged women. And in that video, she talks about that there's two secret gay people in Pokemon that, they explicitly talk about how they were both in love, and, people theorize that they were, related for a while, but that didn't make any fucking sense. And so, gay Pokemon characters predate, She-Ra and Ruby and Arcane and all of this, all these other things. Well, I think it's Zinnia? I don't know, one of them died and exploded or something, and then the other one is living on in her memory, and she talks about it in one of those old-ass Pokemon games.
Even some of the Pokemon are a little bit fruity, you know?
Yeah, so if anyone's interested in watching
in
that
the comic,
gay people
in the
Pokemon
anime,
video, that's what it's basically about.
So male Pikachus have a straight back tail, whereas female have a heart tail. And in one of the anime, I've seen screenshots of it, there's a Pikachu that has a piece of yellow paper taped to the back of its tail, so it looks like a heart.
That's cute.
So it's a transgender Pikachu. So yeah, they've done that a couple times. I just hope they would lean into it with that.
But yeah.
It's one of those things where it's just oh, you could be gay in this Pokemon game. I'd never let my kids you could also be straight.
Yeah, I mean, if your Stardew has...
If your kid wants to be gay, listen,
too.
I could have played a man when I had Sims 3. I didn't, and that was revealing of me as a person.
Yeah, I know, right?
That I would only play as women.
Stardew has, you can marry anyone. Same with this game, right? It's...
I would hope, if they did that, I would hope they would do that. And I'd hope they'd have a very cute, art style more aligned with that Zelda game, I think that's a layup. But that's also like not a wholly new, fresh thing. It's like a mixing of two different things. Yeah.
But I like that. I like that. I like that for us.
I like that for us.
And I mean, I think that that's just the point. Nothing is a fresh, wholly fresh, right?
That's true. That's true.
We're all just a sum of our
Even
parts.
Undertale had a lot of influence from the Mother games and Earthbound and all that.
We will have to talk about other games. Like, I'm like, I could do this forever and talk about other stuff we don't know
I don't even
about.
play video games that much.
I know, but you know everything. What the fuck?
I'm just like, I've just listened to people. People talk about video games, and it was weird. For a very long time, I would watch YouTube videos, and like even before YouTube was like,
right.
I would watch like online videos on like now defunct websites talking about video games. So I feel like I have a breadth of knowledge of games I've never played.
That's true. I watch a bunch of stuff about games I never played, but I think we will end it here, unless do you have anything else to say? Anything in the world?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I'm good too. Thank you, everybody, for joining the Queen's Court podcast. I promise next time we'll try to get it under an hour, but, like, it's our first podcast.
We're rusty. It's fine.
I wanted to talk. I was so excited, and I had a lot of fun, and that's what matters, is that we had fun. So I hope you'll enjoy. We'll see you next week. I don't know. Tell us what you guys want to do. Do you want to look at the Bakugan? Like, I do have, like, a list of ideas, but we can, like, deviate now that we, I think after talking to each other, Hunter, it's like, okay, well, we have a lot of different, like, I have my chaotic, I have my UB funkies somewhere. Like,
I have my old Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys had fun. Thank you for attending Royal Court, and we will see you in the next podcast. Bye.